Welcome back to the VSI webinar series. Over the last few weeks, we've spoken to Mark Allen, former sporting director for Glasgow Rangers, and Sam Stapleton, managing director for Rock Nation Sports. Today, Tom Sears from Kinsey Sears will be speaking to David Allen, former executive for UFC, Adidas, and Nike. Today's theme will focus on innovation in sport and business. Before handing over to Tom, Tim will explain how you guys on the platform can engage with David and ask questions. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Tony. Guys, thanks for your time in attending this. There's two buttons at the bottom. There's one that says chat and there's one Q&A. We prefer you to use the chat one so it's open and everybody can see what questions you're asking, so they're not going to ask the same one. So sometimes we get repeats of it. But if you miss that and you want to use the Q&A, it just means that we click off. It just gives us a bit of a pattern to it. We'll choose the top two or three and we'll ask those questions at the end to try and keep the flow maintained with Tom's questions and Dave answers. So without further ado, the most amazing Mr. Sears.
Thanks, Tim, and afternoon all. Dave, welcome. It's great to have you on. You've had a really interesting career and worked for some of the most innovative brands over the years, as Tony said, Nike, Adidas, UFC, and now Opro. Tell us about some of the developments that you've seen over the years that really stand out for you.
Good morning, Tom. Super to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to come along. Innovation, well, I suppose it's at the heart of all of those companies that I've worked with over the past number of years. I think I was thinking about it last night. What were the outstanding innovations? And because of my love of football, I think my brain just keeps dropping back to innovation within football. And you've got to think back to years and years ago when I was at Adidas. We launched the Predator football boot, if everybody remembers that, with Craig Johnson, and David Beckham was probably one of the first guys to wear it at the time. And that just changed the landscape in how football boots were perceived. They weren't these brown, old, heavy leather boots anymore. All of a sudden, you got something completely different that was supposed to help your game. And then I suppose, I moved over to Nike after spending 7 years at Adidas, and there's just too many things to go through. It goes from whether it's the mercurial football boot, whether it was innovative and lightweight running shoes, to basketball and hoop boots. It just goes on and on. Actually, one of the things that stuck in my mind about the Nike one was actually a marketing innovation rather than a product innovation. And we launched a campaign at the time around the World Cup in 2002 out in Japan. And we said that the ball was rounder. Go figure. But, it changes as you go on. And then my time at the UFC, I think the UFC was just, and is, just innovation in itself as a rights holder in the way that the model was built. There was no league. They had their own production teams. Everything was just completely different. And you could do whatever it was that you decided to do. So some great time there at the UFC. And now my time at Opro, we've done some amazing things, from being a very UK-centric rugby brand to now being a global brand and working across probably 90 different partners all around the world, doing many, many different things, but all in the world of contact sport.
You've got a particular project that you're working on over at the moment that we discussed offline that's really quite interesting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it all stemmed from a conversation that we were having in the office, I would say two and a half years ago, about what's next. At the end of the day, and I don't mean to belittle our product, but we're making a mouth guard. So yes, we could make it better. We could make it fit better. We could give you more protection. We could make it lighter. We could do all those sort of things. But how could you bring some different innovation to the world of sport, not just to the world of mouth guards and to the athletes that we support all around the world? And we started talking about wearable technology. And wearable technology in sport, as you know, Tom, has just grown and grown and grown, whether it's GPS, global positioning systems, where great companies out there like Stat Sports are the leaders in that field and work through that. Whether it's heart rate monitors, for coaches, physios, trainees, the athlete themselves, how they test, how they're doing when they're under strain, what they're doing. Local positioning, helps with indoor sports as well. So many, many different things, even down to sleep trackers. You go asleep and there's a sport app to help monitor what you're doing. So we started thinking about what we could bring to life in the world of wearable technology. And one of the big things, because we were based in a contact sport and primarily in rugby, as I said earlier, one of the big things out there is head impact and what happens in the world of head impact. And, we, again, take rugby as the example. Yes, a player gets injured, they're in a tackle, and they go off for a head injury assessment protocol. And there are many different protocols, not just in rugby, but across many other different sports that are there. But the protocol is done after the fact. And there's no real way of looking at, well, what happened when the impact happened? How can you understand that? So we started talking with a number of different companies around the world, and we landed with a company called Sports Wellbeing and Analytics, SWA for short. I'll try and keep it short on the conversation. So SWA had been working for 2 or 3 years in a research mode on how you could measure impact. So we said, okay, how could we get together? How could we do this? Eventually, what we came up with was that we could put a chip in a mouth guard that will measure head impact. And the reason that the marriage came together was very, very simple, is that there have been many other monitors out there over time, and there could be a skin patch, but your skin moves. So it's not giving you a really good, accurate measurement of what's happening during an impact. If you're wearing a scrum cap, or if you're in the NFL and you're wearing a helmet, all those pieces of equipment will move independently of your skull. Your brain is a floating mass inside the top of your skull. Your skull is connected to your upper jaw. They're the only 2 parts of the body that don't move independently when you get a bash or you get a hit. And so a mouth guard coming together with this technology was absolutely the right place to be. And so we launched this some time ago on a research basis, and now we're live in the market with SWA and bringing it to athletes all around the world. We've got 4 Premier League teams, English Premier League teams, rugby signed up. We've got 4 of the Pro 14 teams signed up. We're involved with a major MMA organization, and we've got many, many others. We're a couple of universities using the product. We've got a couple of women's teams in rugby who are using the product also.
In terms of the implications, Dave, obviously safety is going to be paramount, and that's first and foremost what you're all about. What are the other implications for this sort of technology?
Well, the biggest thing when we said, okay, it's wearable technology, and we brought 2 great product minds together, but the ultimate goal and the mission of it is always to improve the athlete, and improve the athlete, 1, in their performance, 2, in their welfare, and then 3rd, but not last, is the safety of the athlete. So what we're able to do with the data that we receive is look at the performance of the athlete. And the performance of the athlete can be in their technique. It can be in how they're performing actually on the field of play and where they're putting themselves and what's the positioning that they're doing. It can be making sure that the welfare of the athlete is looked after. So we can measure the impact, whether it's during his Tuesday and Thursday and Friday training sessions before you get to game day, or even when you're on game day, well, do you want to rest on the Tuesday and Thursday? So it's looking after the welfare of the athlete, not just for today, but for the long term as well. And I think that's a key thing that we do. We make sure that it's not just the player then, it's can the coaches utilize the data that they're giving? Can the director of rugby utilize the strength and conditioning, the medical teams? there's a whole big group of people, as we all know, that supports the athlete on the field of play. And so if everybody is gaining that data and we're integrating it in with other systems like a StatSport, everything available on one dashboard, so all those strength and conditioning medics, physios can actually see something and go, well, okay, we need to have a look at this player.
And in terms of the mass market, obviously that you're focused on the elite level of game, but safety is paramount at all levels of sport. Any plans to roll it out to the wider public?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yes, we want to look at the top end of the game, and that's where everything really starts, you know, with an elite athlete. But the ultimate goal then is to bring that to mass participation. I've got a 15-year-old boy who plays rugby. He's a hooker, so he actually puts his head in where his foot should be most of the time. So for me personally, it's a big safety issue. And what we want to get to, and we're not far off, we're about 9 to 10 months away from launching a product that is a mass consumer product, where everybody can go into a sports store or buy online, buy a mouthguard with our technology in it, and then the coach on the side could have their mobile phone and they get a notification, kids had a hit. You can take the data afterwards and look as you go to the training sessions during the week, and you can say, well, okay, we need to rest this player, or we need to take him out of impact and give him some different type of training to do. Or again, looking at the technique. So there's many things in the product that we can measure. And we look at direct impact, we look at the orientation of the impact, we look at the change in velocity, the rotational hits that they've had. All of those things that happen in the elite game happen in the underage game. But it's not just rugby. They happen in MMA, they happen in boxing, they happen in hockey, they happen in taekwondo, they happen in many, many sports, any contact sport that's played anywhere in the world that requires you to wear a mouthguard has the need for this product.
The amount of data that's collected now, Dave, and yours seems to be taking it to the next level, but we've had GPS tracking for a while and various other monitoring systems like heart monitors you mentioned. They're very much used for welfare and performance enhancement. Do you see any implications for the spectator at the ground or the viewer at home for this sort of data? Do you think broadcasters will push for more access to this sort of data to enhance the experience?
Yeah, and we've had those conversations already with a number of the major broadcasters around the world who see that, number one, that the measurement that we give to everybody, whether it's the medical or whether it's the strength and conditioning coaches, is live data. It's not after the fact. It's not something you sit down in the dressing room and you analyze afterwards. So it's live data. And as we all know, live sport is what entices everybody to watch and get out of bed. And well, we can't watch it at the moment, sadly, but live sport is what we all crave and what we want. So broadcasters are really, really interested in understanding. You know, we watched the Six Nations as an example, and a player may go off for a head injury assessment. As an entertainment value, you can sit back and say, well, okay, X player has gone off. Then the next announcement you hear is they won't be returning because they failed their head injury assessment. But nobody really tells you what the assessment is, or nobody tells you what the impact the player has had, or nobody tells you they've had 20 impacts during the game. It wasn't just one impact. So there are a number of different things that we're working with many broadcasters. We're working with the people who then can graphize that on the TV. So we can look at where the impacts are happening on the pitch. We can look at, you know, which players are actually being able to handle impact in a different way, which players are looking after their safety. And, you know, you come back to the ultimate piece of all this is what we're trying to do is help the athlete and the team and support their decision making. We're not saying take that player off. We're not saying that player is concussed. We're not saying that boxer is concussed. We're just saying that we can give you objective surveillance that happens. And there's many things that happen. You go down the bottom of a ruck in a rugby match and impacts happen, but nobody actually sees it. What we're able to do, whether that's to a broadcaster or to the team, GDPR all aside as well, we got to get people to agree to their data being shared if that's what they want to do. But over time, I think people will start to see the value in this from the entertainment side on the broadcast. Okay, how can we inform our viewers of more of the things that they don't see, but also some of the things that they do see, so they get a better understanding of the sport and the game, and then that adds value.
In terms of lawmakers, obviously, if they start seeing credible data about the level of impact, be it rugby, boxing, taekwondo, or any other contact sport, is there a concern that the data might lead to radical changes in how those sports are played and it will become less of a contest?
I don't think it'll become less of a contest. And I think, coming back to what I said already, all as we can do is give you objective data that supports decision making. And that decision making will be down for each of those individual sports to do. But I think what we've seen in the testing that we've done already, specifically in the world of rugby, and we're working with a couple of the Pro 14 teams on this, is that, and I'll use a training example as the best one. One of the biggest training drills that the forwards go through is called the jackal. One guy's on the ground with the ball, another guy goes over, they're holding the ball, and then they're practicing that throughout their training session. Working with the Ospreys, we've been looking at, well, the guy that's holding the ball is not the one that's getting the impact. That's what we thought. Actually, he was the only one that was getting the impact. So what we did was, working with Ospreys, we said, well, okay, how about if we change the run-in to that drill from 10 meters to 5 meters, let's see what happens. So we started doing the drill at 5 meters. All of a sudden, there was no impact to the player. And this was in the training process. So could it end up changing the game? I'm not so sure it'll change the game, but it'll make us look at different ways of working. It'll help players in how their style of tackling may be. It'll help athletes when they're in a boxing or an MMA fight understand that, okay, I've been hit, but what way do I want to recover? Do I need some more time? Do I need less time, punching in the training session or in the 12 weeks leading up to a fight? How do I do different things? I'm not so sure it will change the laws of the game, but it'll change the way that we do it for the better.
You look at some other sports and the technological advances, particularly in things like, I'm thinking of golf, with the advances in equipment, cricket bats. We've had Vaporflies recently, where technology is enhancing the elite athlete's performance to such a level that some purists are saying, actually, we need to rein back technology. What are your views on that?
I like a better golf stick, that's for sure. I think if it can help me hit it further, that'll help me. Or I like a lighter shoe that'll help me run better. So I'm not so sure that if it's available to all, my belief is that it's fair within the sport. Looking at the sub 2 hour marathon is probably the best example here. People are talking about the Vaporfly and was that the one thing that did it? No, it wasn't. He's a superb athlete. Did it help his performance? Absolutely. And I think from day one, when sports equipment manufacturers started out, it was all about how do we make the athlete better? And that's what I talked about at the beginning of our chat today was, how do we improve athlete performance? We're not cheating. And I don't think anybody will go down that road. It's not about cheating. It's about just enhancing, helping the performance of the athlete, making things better for them so they can excel with what they do. The Vaporfly is a great example of that, and it's available to everybody. You know, I'm a runner. I go out and I have a run. I am not going to run a sub 2-hour marathon unless I'm on a motorbike, you know, so it's not going to happen. But could that improve my performance? Probably. Can our mouth guard improve a player's performance? Absolutely it will, because we'll be giving them more information and we'll be giving them more data that they can work with. But I think, you know, I'll come back to it. I think all the time, it is all about making sure that the athletes themselves are able to improve, and whether that's at the very elite level or it's at my and your level of participating in sport, or it's your kids. You know, they're out playing in the park and you want to get them better and you want to make sure that they can get to the best of their ability. That's what sports equipment companies have done since eternity. You know, I've worked, as you said, at Adidas, Nike, Umbro, UFC. All the time it was, how do we improve the athlete? That's the ultimate goal.
You mentioned at the start of that conversation the Predator boot, and that was invented effectively by the former Liverpool player Craig Johnston. That was one of the first examples I can remember of very much an athlete-led innovation. Do you think that's more the case now, and what does that process look like?
I think there's always the mantra of ask the athlete. You know, if you want to bring something to the market, you got to speak to your end consumer, and your ultimate end consumer is the athlete. So, you know, I've got the chip in the back of my neck rather than in the mouth guard. I've got the chip in the back of my neck from my time at Nike, and it was all about asking the athlete. So no matter what the people would invent and dream up and think, oh, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. Well, it's never going to be fantastic until you sit down with the athlete and you work out what they need, what's right, what do they want, how do they want to make it work better. You know, I've spent many times where you go, well, do we want to do consumer research, or do we want to go out and ask thousands of people all around the world what they think about the color of a boot? Yeah, you can do all that. But unless you're sitting with the athlete and you want to make that athlete faster, you want to make that athlete stronger, you want to make them jump higher, whatever it is, it's got to be with the athlete. You know, Nike at my time had a whole building out in Beaverton, Oregon, which was the Innovation Kitchen, as it was called. It was a hell of a kitchen. It was about 7 stories high and about 2,000 people working in it at the time. They were dreaming up stuff every single day of the week, but no way would that make it to the market unless they sat with the athletes and they talked through the athletes and figured out what it was that you needed to do. And again, coming back to your first question, when you talked to me about, you know, some of the innovative things, I remember at the time working with Tiger Woods, and they were bringing out the Nike ball. And we all remember that ball dropping in the Masters when it just dropped into the hole with the swoosh on it. They spent time working with Tiger Woods on that golf ball. And he put the golf ball down and he'll hit it and he'll put another, and he keep hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And all they were trying to change was the sound, because he liked a certain sound. And we understand that. You want to hear that ping and that click. Until they got the sound right, nothing else mattered. But it was working with the athlete and ensuring that it was fulfilling their needs.
Over the years, there's been some weird and wonderful innovations. And I'm thinking back to Dennis Lilly's metal cricket bat, that sort of thing. Any ideas that you came across that you just thought were completely off the wall?
Oh, you caught me off. Yeah, I suppose there were some things more in the world of apparel. You know, could they make apparel that would you know, make a footballer better, or make a runner go faster, and I think the innovation in most sports does come either to the equipment or to the footwear. There are a number of things that we always found very difficult. Yes, we could wick away moisture, or you could keep you warmer, or keep you drier, or keep you cooler. But some crazy stuff, there's been some crazy stuff that probably wouldn't be right for me to say, because the poor inventor that came up with it would be going, no, I'm still working on it. It's going to come. It'll come, and I'll have egg on my face then maybe. So no, I'm not going to go after Dennis Lindy's metal bat. That was one for sure.
We've talked about what's out there now. Where do you see future innovation? What do you think we'll be seeing at both elite level and participation level over the next 3 to 5 years? Where are the big trends going to be?
Well, I think something like I'm working on now, which is going to at elite level, and like I say, in 8 to 10 months' time, will drop down to mass consumer level. I think if we look at the Vaporfly piece of footwear, it was at elite level and immediately dropped down to mass consumer access. I think that's where things will go a lot faster. There was a time where, in my Nike football days when I was working on that we would make shoes and footwear specifically for that athlete down in Montebelluna in Italy. And it would take a long time before that boot would get itself to the mass consumer. So I think that's number one, is the speed. I think where we'll see things change also will be in a blurring of the lines between real sport and what's called esports. So how esports and real sports come to life in its own way, and what innovations will come out of that. I think that's rather than them being two verticals, real sport and esport, I actually see where there be a place where these two things will merge together. And I think the blurring of the lines are nearly there. We had the Grand National on the TV at the weekend. Is that real sport? No. Is it esports? Yeah, a little bit, yes. But we were all able to bet. The NHS, we're the beneficiary of it, thanks to the work of the bookmakers and everybody else. But it was fantastic entertainment in its own way as well. So I think that's what we're going to see in innovation, is a blurring of those lines and those two pieces coming together. It's a really interesting space.
Do you think over the years and in your experience, some sports have been slower to embrace technological advances than others?
Yeah, and I think that's just a factor of life or a factor of structure. You got an organization within the world of football, and they've got to look after 168 countries. And so you've got the rich and you've got the poor. And so if you bring something into play, and whether that's Hawkeye in sport, or whether it's goal line technology, or what's been going on in the Premier League this year, where we're all waiting to see, was it a goal or was it an offside? That hasn't made its way to every level of the game. And even if it makes its way to every level of the game here in the UK, where we are, will it make its way to every level of the game in other countries around the place? So I think as we bring innovation and we bring new technology, we've got to try and make sure that it has a line that has its equality right around this sport, whether that's football, rugby, MMA, boxing. Whatever it is, has to be level playing field right across. And I do think some organizations are better at pushing that needle, making sure that it happens, and they won't bring things in unless it's for everybody. Other organizations maybe not so fast on that.
A final question from me, Dave, for now. What would you like to see? Where do you think the real opportunities lie over the next few years?
Well, I think it's all around data. The more, and we hear that in business every day of the week, data is the big thing, and collect as much data as you can and figure out what to do with it. But I think it's about understanding and making objective decisions around data. And that can be data for my 15-year-old boy, and understanding how his game can get better. It's the same at the elite level of sport. So I think there's that. I think we've got to embrace the changing world that we're living in, from a broadcast and a viewership piece, and devices and how people consume sport, when they consume it, how long they consume it for. Anybody who's got kids at this point in time, they're sitting on a phone, They've got an iPad on and the TV can be on in the same room. You know, and I've had the conversations with my son. Are you watching the game? And he goes, yeah, but he's got three things going on. So I think trying to figure out how all those intersections come to life, and then how in business we're able to monetize all that. The only way that we're going to do that is by having a better understanding. And the way we get a better understanding is through data. It's really understanding how the information comes in to a broadcast company, to a manufacturer within sporting goods, to the federations, to the clubs, to the players, to social media. It's all of those things making their way into that one eco world that we live in.
Dave, fantastic. Really interesting insight into the world of technology in sport. I'll hand over to Tim now, who hopefully has got some questions for you from the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. There's a couple of quick questions that have come straight through, so I'm going to straight through to Nathan Thompson. Dave said, what key qualities do you think you need to possess in order to be able to make a transition across different industries?
Across different industries, I would probably say it's not about getting across different industries. It's whether you're in one industry or you want to move to another industry, is working out what's your USP, what makes you different. You know, I worked for Adidas, which was a very Germanic organization and a hierarchical organization. And yes, it was still within the world of sport, but I then moved to a US organization in the world of sport, but who were a matrix-driven organization. So totally different structure in the way that the company was built. And then moving from there to Umbro, which was a traditional British brand based in Cheadle down the road from where I am, and understanding that. So I think it's about understanding the model of the business, number one, understanding the culture of the business that you're moving into, and understanding the culture of the industry that you're in. We can talk about business leadership or your skill set or many of the different things that come to play once you're there. But I think that the most important thing is really understanding the culture of the company and the industry that you're in, and using your skill set and being able to transfer those over.
Great answer. Great answer. Those transferable skills, depending on the research that you put in there to make sure that the market, the culture and everything else, you've got a better understanding of it. Yeah, great answer. Thank you. So Stefan has put, could you give some examples of innovations that didn't work, Dave, and why they didn't work, and what did you learn from those mistakes?
Tom asked a question there earlier. There was a place one time, and it was, I'm not sure if it was in my Nike days, but the end result was in my Nike days, where people were talking about putting springs on shoes. You know, so it was when you hit the ground and the impact was different. And, you know, it never came to any fruition. But the concept and the idea was right. And then eventually Nike were able to bring a shoe out. If you remember the shoe, Tim, it was the Nike Shox with the little pillars on the back. Yeah. So it was taking that idea that never really came to fruition, but how can you make it work? So, you know, and I did say in the earlier answer, there are crazy things that have happened, and, you know, you go and Google it, you'll see them. But there are some crazy ideas that actually just need fine tuning, and they need you talking to that athlete and need you working on them and more. Just keep working on the idea. If you believe the idea is a good idea, keep working on it and you'll find your way through with it.
Okay. Carl from Norway says, what is the greatest innovation you've ever seen in sport? But if you take a bit of a hinge on that to say, what would you say is the biggest single differential that's come across in your lifetime that you'd say, from a technological advantage, has made the biggest difference to a sport? What would you say it would be? One thing.
One thing. Well, because you've got everything. You know, we talked about whether it's a GPS tracker, whether it's a heart rate tracker, whether it's a local positioning, whether it's, you know, years and years ago when you were a runner, you'd come home and you'd log it all down, you'd write it down. Now everything is on your phone. all the data you need is on your phone, all the training programs, all the access you need. If you want to watch, you want to improve yourself, you want to do many, many different things. It all comes down to the device in its own way. From a sporting goods point of view, I'm biased. I make no bones about this. For me, Nike Air was the big difference. Cushioning, durability, helping improve speed, and the innovation that first airbag was then taken into many, many different editions, but then taking performance product and being able to make that into sports wear and street lifestyle. I think Air is probably one of those big innovations that changed the landscape of sport.
Am I right in thinking that was down to, was that working specifically with like Jordan in those days? Because that was he made that kind of hip, didn't he? When you say they're making that transition into streetwear and making it cool and credible.
Yeah, I think there were many editions of, where Jordan did it in a US basketball culture, and this comes back to that first question. It was the culture of basketball and what Jordan stood for, but also then how you took Air in many, many different ways across running silos, across football silos. You took it into many different places, and I think each of those cultures of that sport then embraced it in a different way in street style. So, the football culture that is on the terraces, well, how do they embrace it? And I think that was an important change in the landscape of sporting goods.
Fascinating, Dave. I could sit and chat all day, and maybe we'll get time to do this over a pint, maybe. But I've just found that absolutely fascinating, spot on. Tom, I'm going to hand it back to you to kind of wrap up and pick up, and then if you can do the hospital pass back to Tony so he can let us know what's happening next week, that'd be amazing. Again, thanks very much for your time, Dave. Been amazing. Thank you.
It was fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Tom.
Thanks, Tim. Dave, brilliant to speak to you. Fantastic insight into your years of experience. Really interesting to get your views on what's coming down the line as well. I know we're talking again in the not too distant future about other areas of your career, and I look forward to doing that soon. Thanks very much for your time, and I'll hand back to Tony.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Really informative session. Dave, thanks as always. Really appreciated that. For everyone on the platform, we will be speaking to Dave again next week with quite an interesting title, which is If You Love Your Work, You'll Never Have to Work a Day in Your Life. So we will be back on air next week with Tom, discussing more about his experiences across 3 of the world's biggest brands. Until then, guys, stay safe. See you all next week.